The email arrived late on a Tuesday, buried deep within a tidal wave of client invoices and internal team meeting summaries. The subject line was direct, almost painfully so. Moving on. It was from my business partner of 6 years, Marcus. My hands didn't shake as I read the words, nor did my voice waver as I gave our lead graphic designer notes on a new client's logo. The only sign that the person I had built a thriving business from scratch with was attempting to betray me was a slight, almost imperceptible tightening around my jaw. I waited until I was alone, the office silent save for the hum of the server before I typed my response. It was simple, professional, and entirely devoid of the emotional response he undoubtedly expected. Understood. Best of luck. My name is Anna, and at 35, I had just received what could be called the most professional betrayal in history. While Marcus was probably already gloating over his grand exit, imagining me in a panic scrambling to keep our business afloat, I was calmly reviewing the partnership agreement we had meticulously drafted all those years ago. The signs, of course, had been there for months. The subtle shifts in his behavior, the sudden closed-door meetings with our top-tier client, Novatech, the coded messages exchanged on our project management software, the way he'd started talking about new business opportunities and expanding our horizons, not in a collaborative sense, but as if they were his alone to claim. He had begun to see Ascent, the business we had poured our lives into, not as a shared venture, but as a stepping stone. 3 months ago, a casual audit of my junk email folder had revealed a series of deeply unsettling messages from Marcus to a competing firm's CEO, asking about a potential merger with a specific foundation in place. That foundation was us, our client list, and specifically the jewel in our crown, Novatech. That very same evening, with a sense of quiet dread that I refused to acknowledge, I started creating a digital log of every client meeting, every client-facing conversation, and every single deliverable I had personally overseen since our inception. I was an archivist of my own professional life. A week later, when he'd suggested he take the lead on a new, high-stakes campaign, I'd agreed cheerfully. Not because I trusted him, but because I was already 2 steps ahead. While he was basking in the spotlight, I was quietly taking screenshots of our project management board, meticulously documenting his every move and every claim. The Novatech account, the one he had just so brazenly poached, was a direct result of a pitch I had personally put together in a professional relationship I had cultivated for over 3 years. The rest of our clients, our bread and butter, were safely tucked away, with detailed records of every contract I had secured and every campaign I had managed over the past year. I had built a fortress of documentation, and he was about to charge the walls with a pop gun. My phone buzzed again, an urgent vibration that cut through the office's quiet. "Don't worry," the text from Marcus read, a casual cruelty in its brevity. "I've already secured the Novatech account. We can work out the details later." His focus was so laser-like on his perceived win that he had forgotten the first, most fundamental rule of business. Contracts matter more than handshakes. I didn't respond to his text. I didn't need to. He had already made his move, and in doing so, had fallen directly into the web of my foresight. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd first consulted 2 months ago when I'd first noticed his odd, predatory behavior. I had chosen her not because she was the most expensive, but because she was the most precise, the most methodical. "It's time," I said simply. "He just made his move." "The papers are ready," she replied, her voice as calm and steady as my own. "We'll file them first thing tomorrow." Let him think he's won first. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. Let him bask in the temporary glory of his foolish plan before the reality of his mistake came crashing down. That evening, I remained in my office, a space I'd meticulously designed and where I frankly spent more time than in my own home. I finished organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need. I found an old photo of us from when we had first started. Two optimistic young professionals with a dream and a shared vision. We looked so different then, before greed had turned him into a caricature of a ruthless businessman. These days, he wore shirts that were too tight for his softening ego, tried too hard to impress the young hotshots at tech conferences, and used jargon that sounded ridiculous coming from a man of tear. My phone kept buzzing, with texts from him, each one more condescending and self-serving than the last. "I've been planning this for months," one read. "My vision is just too big for your small thinking," another. "I'm doing you a favor." Really? I screenshotted each message, adding them to my ever-growing evidence folder. Let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation, his gleeful announcement about securing the Novatech account while he was still a partner. The final text caught my attention. "BTW," it read. "I've already signed the non-solicitation agreement. Consider it my parting gift." He was referring to a legal clause that prevented a partner from poaching existing clients for a set period after leaving. Perfect. He was so proud of himself for doing the bare minimum that he'd forgotten. He wasn't allowed to take the client he had been plotting to take for months. "You admitted via text message to deliberately attempting to poach a key client in violation of a legal agreement you signed. Do you deny this?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing professional fraud?" The judge raised an eyebrow. I watched Marcus's face as the reality started to sink in. He thought this would be easy. Poach our most important client and sail off to a more lucrative career. He'd never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping meticulous records and having airtight contracts. The court finds sufficient evidence of misconduct. All partnership assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to cease all contact with Ascent's clients and employees, effective immediately. Outside the courthouse, Marcus hissed, "You think you're so smart. You've ruined me." "No," I replied, turning to walk away. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure you couldn't ruin me too." I walked back to the business he'd never understood or respected. My phone buzzed not with texts from Marcus, but with notifications of new inquiries from potential clients. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he had imagined. The days that followed the emergency hearing were a whirlwind of quiet, satisfying victories. The court's verdict, though not a final dissolution, was a definitive statement. It validated my meticulous planning and cast Marcus's actions in the cold, harsh light of professional misconduct. The injunction meant he could no longer access any partnership assets, effectively freezing him out of the business he had spent 6 years trying to take over. I watched his social media, an outlet he had always used for self-aggrandizement, turn into a platform for thinly veiled attacks against me. He didn't mention my name directly, of course. He was a coward at heart. Instead, he posted cryptic messages about toxic partners and unethical business practices, framing himself as the victim of a calculated betrayal. He thought he was rallying support. I knew he was only revealing his desperation. It was a textbook reaction from someone who had always prioritized the perception of success over the reality of it. I didn't engage. My lawyer had advised me to maintain a professional silence, and frankly, I had no desire to dignify his pathetic attempts with a response. My focus was on the business. My little team, a group of dedicated professionals who had come to me over the years because they believed in my vision, remained loyal. Marcus had tried to sway them, sending out a mass text that read, "Your futures are uncertain. Come join my new venture, where you'll be treated with respect." Only one person had even responded. Our junior analyst, who replied with a simple, "No, thank you, Marcus. We're busy." That single text, I believe, spoke volumes about the culture I had built, one of trust, professionalism, and mutual respect, something he could never replicate. The real vindication came in the form of my phone ringing. It was from a company called Synapse, a major tech firm I had been courting for months, a client whose reputation and budget were on an entirely different level than Novatech's. The contact was their CEO, a woman named Elena Vance, known for her sharp business acumen and an intolerance for drama. "Anna," she began, her voice crisp and to the point. "I'm not going to pretend I haven't heard the whispers. I'm a professional and I believe in due diligence. Your firm's name has come up in some recent chatter." I braced myself, ready for the conversation I had anticipated. "What I'm hearing is that you are a meticulous, forward-thinking businesswoman who is a master of her craft, and that your now ex-partner is a fool who got his comeuppance." I felt a smile spread across my face. "I've been following your work for a while now, and the way you handled this situation, the quiet, methodical way you protected your business, tells me everything. I need to know about your character and your ability to deliver under pressure." The revenge wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the work. It was in the late nights I spent poring over proposals, in the meticulous planning of every campaign, in the quiet confidence of knowing I had not only protected my business, but had also set it on a path to unprecedented success. Marcus thought his grand exit would be the end of my story. He was wrong. It was only the beginning. He had underestimated me at every turn. He had underestimated my foresight, my preparation, and my quiet, unyielding determination. And in doing so, he had sealed his own fate. My life was moving forward, faster and more powerfully than he could have ever imagined. The phone rang again, this time from my lawyer. "Marcus has filed another motion," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "He's claiming you're unfairly profiting from his work during the partnership. He's asking for a portion of your profits." I simply laughed. He was trying to sue me for the very thing he had tried to take from me. It was a new challenge, and one I was more than ready to face. I had all the documentation I needed, all the evidence of my independent work and his lack of contribution. It was just another chapter in a story he had started, but that I would get to finish. Marcus's motion to claim a portion of Ascent's profits was a new level of audacity. It was as predictable as it was pathetic. A last, desperate lunge from a man who had run out of professional options. His lawyer, a sharp-tongued litigator who clearly believed in the say anything to win school of thought, framed the argument around Marcus's supposed sweat equity and intellectual contributions during the partnership. They were attempting to paint a picture of a successful partnership where my former partner was a silent, unsung hero whose efforts were now being unfairly excluded from the business's booming profits. The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. The very business he had, called my little shop, the one he had openly belittled and dismissed, was now the subject of his greedy legal claims. I wasn't angry. Anger was a wasted emotion, a distraction from the task at hand. I was, however, deeply methodical. My lawyer and I moved through the court, documents with the surgical precision of seasoned professionals. This wasn't a revenge story born of spite. It was a business strategy born of foresight. I went back into my digital fortress of documentation. This time I didn't just pull up the records related to Marcus's malfeasance. I brought out a comprehensive financial history of Ascent. I had meticulously separated my personal and professional finances from the very beginning. Every investment I had made, every client I had personally brought in, every late night I had spent in the office. While Marcus was out, networking had been logged and accounted for. My lawyer and I prepared a counter motion that would not only expose his claim as a fabrication, but would also publicly highlight his professional negligence. We had his condescending texts about my small thinking and my little shop, which would serve as a powerful contrast to his sudden claim of being a co-architect of our success. The evidence of his lack of contribution was overwhelming. We weren't just proving his lies. We were proving his apathy. The Synapse project, in the meantime, had become a powerful counter-narrative to his public accusations. While he was telling anyone who would listen that I was a vindictive micromanager, I was in the process of scaling my business to a size he never thought possible. Elena Vance, the Synapse CEO, had been true to her word. The project was a global launch, requiring me to hire a new team of professionals who were not only brilliant at their craft, but also aligned with my values. I wasn't just looking for talent. I was looking for character. I held a series of interviews, asking candidates not only about their professional achievements, but also about their work ethic and their views on collaboration. I was building a team that was loyal not to a person, but to a mission. I was careful to avoid anyone who had a history of jumping ship or who exhibited the kind of grandiosity that had become Marcus's defining trait. I saw a hunger in the eyes of my new hires, a genuine desire to build something great. And it was a powerful contrast to the parasitic greed that had defined my former partner. The word on the street about Marcus was not good. He'd burned too many bridges. His desperate attempts to poach clients from Ascent had not gone unnoticed by the industry. The professional community is a small one, and news travels fast. He was not just the guy who tried to leave his business partner. He was the guy who got a legal injunction against him and who had a reputation for professional misconduct. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling to find work. The rival firm he had tried to partner with had not only passed on him but had used him as a cautionary tale for their own employees. He was a professional pariah, and his downward spiral was entirely of his own making. I felt no satisfaction in this, only a sense of professional relief. The man I had once trusted was no longer my problem. He had removed himself from the professional landscape, and his self-destruction was simply a matter of time. This new legal challenge, while a nuisance, was also a gift. It provided me with a public platform to demonstrate once again the difference between a reactive mind and a proactive one. He was fighting a war that had been over before it had even begun. He was still living in the past, obsessed with what he could have taken. I, on the other hand, was living in the future, focused on what I could build. The contrast was evident in my daily life. While he was spending his time and money on legal fees, I was using that same energy to grow my business. I was a CEO, a visionary, and an employer. And with every new hire and every new client I secured, the little business he had mocked grew into something he would never be able to comprehend. He had underestimated me at every turn. He had underestimated my intelligence, my foresight, and my unyielding determination. He had assumed that because I was quiet, I was also complacent. He thought because I was professional, I was not also a fierce protector of my own interests. He had mistaken my calm for weakness. But what he failed to see was that true strength isn't loud or brash. It's a quiet, methodical force, a silent current that moves relentlessly toward its goal. The court hearing was just the start of my vindication. The true revenge would be my success. A success so total and so indisputable that his claims would be seen as nothing. More than the bitter, desperate cries of a man who had lost everything. My lawyer called to tell me the judge had set a hearing date. I was ready. I had all the documentation I needed. I was not just going to prove him wrong. I was going to prove that his entire claim was an absurd fantasy. The stage was set for a public dismantling of his professional legacy. The man who had thought he was a mastermind was about to be exposed as a fool. This was not about money for me. This was about principle. It was about proving to myself and to the industry that integrity and preparation always win in the end. He was so focused on what he could acquire that he never stopped to consider what he would lose. The hearing was scheduled for a cold, gray Monday morning, and the atmosphere in the courtroom felt just as stark. The space was a study in contrasts. On one side, there was Marcus, looking disheveled and frantic, his tie slightly askew, his hastily hired lawyer whispering to him with increasing urgency. He still had the arrogance that had defined him, but it was now laced with a desperation that was painfully obvious. On the other side, there was me. I had chosen a simple but impeccable charcoal suit. My posture was straight, my expression calm. I was a professional, here to resolve a business matter, not to fight a personal war. My lawyer, her demeanor as sharp and precise as ever, arranged our documents on the table with a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. The judge, a woman with a no-nonsense reputation, entered the room and the proceedings began. Marcus's lawyer started with a theatrical monologue about how my former partner had been the engine behind the success of Ascent and how I was now maliciously attempting to exclude him from the profits he painted a picture of a loyal, partner cast aside, a man who had dedicated his life to a business that was now unfairly denying him his due. His voice was loud, his gestures broad. It was a performance, and a rather poor one at that. My lawyer waited patiently for him to finish. When he finally concluded, she rose, and her voice, though quiet, cut through the room like a scalpel. She began not with an emotional appeal, but with facts. Your Honor, my client and Mr. Harrison entered into a business partnership 6 years ago. That partnership was governed by a legal agreement, a copy of which is in the court record. She then began to methodically present our evidence. She started with the core document, the partnership agreement, pointing out the clauses that governed the separation of assets and the non-solicitation of clients. Then she moved to the financial records. She presented a ledger, meticulously compiled by my accounting team, that showed every single investment I had made. Personally, in the business, she showed how my personal capital had funded our initial startup, how I had secured our first bank loan, and how I had paid for a significant portion of our operational expenses for the first 3 years. She contrasted this with Marcus's contributions, which were minimal at best. While Mr. Harrison was out networking, as he so often claimed, my client was in the office, building our client list, managing campaigns, and ensuring the financial health of our business, she stated, her voice even. The business grew, not because of Mr. Harrison's sweat equity, but because of my client's hard work and sound financial management. Next, she moved to the damning personal testimony, Marcus's own words. She presented the series of text messages he had sent me, the one where he gloated about securing the Novatech account, the one where he called my business a little shop. The judge read them, and I saw a flicker of disbelief, then something colder in her eyes. He claims to have been the engine of our success, my lawyer continued, but his own words demonstrate that he held the very business he now claims a portion of in complete contempt. His actions were not those of a partner, but of a saboteur. Marcus's lawyer objected, calling the texts out of context, but the judge quickly overruled him. The contrast was irrefutable. His claims of a substantial contribution were completely undermined by his own gleeful admissions of dismissal. My lawyer then presented the final nail in the coffin, the evidence of his professional negligence and deceit, the emails he had sent to the competing firm, the attempts to poach our clients from a burner phone, the social media posts where he had tried to tarnish my reputation. She had it all, neatly compiled and presented in a way that left no room for doubt. Marcus, who had been whispering to his lawyer just minutes before, now sat in stunned silence, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. He had believed his lies for so long, had convinced himself that his actions were clever, that his arrogance was a strength, that he was a mastermind. In that moment, he was seeing himself through the objective, unforgiving lens of the legal system, and he was not the brilliant businessman he imagined himself to be. The judge looked at him over the top of her glasses. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice a low, gravelly rumble, "your motion is not only without merit, it is an egregious abuse of the court system. The evidence presented by Ms. Harrison's counsel clearly demonstrates that your claim of a substantial contribution to this business is entirely baseless. The documentation shows that not only did you contribute minimally, but you actively attempted to undermine and sabotage the very business you now seek to profit from." She then delivered the final blow. "This court finds sufficient evidence of your misconduct to not only dismiss your motion with prejudice, but to order that you pay all legal fees incurred by Ms. Harrison in this frivolous action." She then looked at my lawyer. "Counselor, the court is satisfied with your presentation. This case is closed." Outside the courthouse, I felt a sense of profound relief, a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. It wasn't about winning. It was about the finality. The legal system had spoken. He had no more avenues, no more claims, No more tricks up his sleeve. He was done. I saw him talking to his lawyer in the parking lot, his gestures wild and his voice rising in anger. I simply walked past, my heels clicking confidently on the pavement. A small, triumphant sound. He had thought he was a player in a grand, complex game. He was just a spectator watching me walk away with the prize. My phone buzzed as I got into my car. It was my lawyer. "That was one of the cleanest cases I've ever seen," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Your documentation was impeccable." He didn't stand a chance. I smiled. The revenge wasn't in the victory. It was in the years of quiet preparation that made the victory inevitable. I was no longer just a business owner. I was a businesswoman who had survived a professional betrayal and had come out of it stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever. I had built a business that was not only surviving but thriving, a testament to my own hard work and foresight. He had been so focused on what he could steal that he never stopped to consider what I had built. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying part of all. The Synapse project was waiting, and I had a business to run. The hearing was scheduled for a cold, gray Monday morning, and the atmosphere in the courtroom felt just as stark. The space was a study in contrasts. On one side, there was Marcus, looking disheveled and frantic, his tie slightly askew, his hastily hired lawyer whispering to him with increasing urgency. He still had the arrogance that had defined him, but it was now laced with a desperation that was painfully obvious. On the other side, there was me. I had chosen a simple but impeccable charcoal suit. My posture was straight, my expression calm. I was a professional, here to resolve a business matter, not to fight a personal war. My lawyer, her demeanor as sharp and precise as ever, arranged our documents on the table with a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. The judge, a woman with a no-nonsense reputation, entered the room and the proceedings began. Marcus's lawyer started with a theatrical monologue about how my former partner had been the engine behind the success of Ascent and how I was now maliciously attempting to exclude him from the profits. He painted a picture of a loyal, partner cast aside, a man who had dedicated his life to a business that was now unfairly denying him his due. His voice was loud, his gestures broad. It was a performance, and a rather poor one at that. My lawyer waited patiently for him to finish. When he finally concluded, she rose, and her voice, though quiet, cut through the room like a scalpel. She began not with an emotional appeal, but with facts. "Your Honor, my client and Mr. Harrison entered into a business partnership 6 years ago. That partnership was governed by a legal agreement, a copy of which is in the court record." She then began to methodically present our evidence. She started with the core document, the partnership agreement, pointing out the clauses that governed the separation of assets and the non-solicitation of clients. Then she moved to the financial records. She presented a ledger, meticulously compiled by my accounting team, that showed every single investment I had made. Personally, in the business, she showed how my personal capital had funded our initial startup, how I had secured our first bank loan, and how I had paid for a significant portion of our operational expenses for the first 3 years. She contrasted this with Marcus's contributions, which were minimal at best. While Mr. Harrison was out networking, as he so often claimed, my client was in the office, building our client list, managing campaigns, and ensuring the financial health of our business, she stated, her voice even. The business grew, not because of Mr. Harrison's sweat equity, but because of my client's hard work and sound financial management. Everyone heard about the legal mess. He's damaged goods. I felt no joy in hearing this, only a sense of detachment. He had done this to himself. He had made a series of choices, each one based on greed and arrogance, and he was now living with the consequences. He had thought that because he was charming, he could get away with anything. He had failed to realize that charm is not a substitute for character. He was a man with a shattered professional legacy, and his personal life was no better. I heard he was in a string of desperate, short-lived relationships, each one ending in a dramatic fashion. The man who had mocked my intelligence and my work ethic was now a cautionary tale, a ghost in the very industry he had tried to conquer. I had been so focused on proving him wrong that I hadn't stopped to consider what it meant to truly win. The revenge wasn't in his downfall, a process over which I had no control. The revenge was in my rising. It was in the confident conversations with my new employees, in the long-term strategic plans I was now making for Ascent, in the sheer satisfaction of a job well done. I was no longer defined by his betrayal. I was defined by my own success, my own resilience, my own quiet strength. He had been a poison in my professional life, and his removal had allowed me to flourish in a way I never thought possible. His betrayal had been a catalyst, a brutal but necessary push that forced me to step into my own power. The ultimate irony of his story, and the most satisfying part of mine, was that he had created the very conditions that led to my success. Without his attempt at sabotage, I would not have had the opportunity to prove my worth to Elena Vance. Without his public attacks, my name would not have been in the news, drawing the attention of new major clients. He had been so focused on destroying me that he had inadvertently built the very foundation for my empire. My victory was not a reaction to his cruelty. It was a consequence of his foolishness. I had a new sense of purpose, a new fire in my belly. My focus was on what was next. My phone buzzed with a message from a professional association I was a member of. They were inviting me to speak at a conference on professional resilience in the face of adversity. I smiled as I read the invitation. The story had changed. I was no longer the betrayed partner. I was the keynote speaker. This wasn't just a business for me anymore. It was a platform. The invitation to speak at the conference felt like the final, definitive stamp of approval on my story. It was an affirmation that I was no longer defined by the professional betrayal I had endured. I was now a leader, a case study in resilience. The conference hall was packed, filled with seasoned professionals, ambitious entrepreneurs, and young hopefuls eager to learn from those who had not only survived, but thrived. I walked onto the stage to a warm round of applause. The moderator introduced me as a visionary businesswoman who transformed a challenge into a launching pad for unprecedented success. The introduction, I noticed, made no mention of Marcus, of the legal battle, or of the word revenge. It was about me, my business, and my story of growth. It was a beautiful, quiet victory in itself. I began my speech not by talking about the betrayal, but by talking about the importance of professional contracts. I shared my journey of building Ascent, from the initial excitement to the meticulous process of drafting our partnership agreement. I believe that the best business relationships are built on trust, I said, my voice steady and clear. But the smartest business relationships are built on legal documents that protect both parties. My story is not one of a dramatic fight. It's one of a person who paid attention to the details, who valued preparation over wishful thinking. I then went on to talk about the concept of foresight. I explained how I had created a digital fortress of documentation long before I ever suspected anything was wrong. I showed a slide with a simple quote. "Your documentation is your best friend." The crowd laughed, but it was a knowing, appreciative laugh. They understood. I then spoke about my decision to focus on my work and my clients during the legal battle. While others were focused on the drama, I said, I was focused on the business. My clients didn't care about a feud between partners. They cared about their projects, and I was committed to ensuring their success was never compromised. The Q&A session was a powerful experience. A young woman in the front row asked me, "My boss is constantly taking credit for my ideas. How do I prove that my work is my own?" I smiled. "Documentation is everything," I told her. "Keep a log of every idea, every email, every conversation. Don't confront him. Just continue to do your job with excellence. and build your own evidence. In the professional world, the truth is not what you claim it is. It's what you can prove it is. Another woman asked me if I ever felt a desire to get even. Getting even is a waste of energy, I replied. It keeps you in a negative space. The best revenge is living a successful life, on your own terms. My success is not about making Marcus miserable. It's about building a future I can be proud of. The words felt authentic and deeply true. My story had become bigger than me. It was a testament to the power of self-reliance and the importance of having a professional safety net. News of Marcus's fate, meanwhile, came to me in a different form. A former colleague, someone who had worked closely with Marcus for years, sent me an email. He was now working at another firm, and his tone was one of genuine remorse and newfound clarity. "I'm not writing to you for a favor, Anna," he wrote. "I'm writing to apologize. I never understood what you were doing. We all thought you were overreacting, but I saw Marcus at a conference last month. He looked lost. He tried to tell me about some business idea, but he couldn't even get through the pitch. His reputation is gone. No one will hire him. He's been living on a dwindling savings account. I heard his family is refusing to bail him out anymore. He tried to apply for a job at my firm, but the partner in charge just laughed. They'd seen the court records. He destroyed himself, Anna. He was so focused on being a big man. He never learned to be a good one." I read the email, and for the first time, I felt something akin to pity for him. But it was a professional pity, a detached observation of a cautionary tale. He was the one who had written his own sad ending. The revenge, I realized, had been happening all along, not through my actions, but through his. My triumph was in the success of the Synapse project, in the energy of my new team, in the professional respect I was now receiving. His failure was in his own hubris, in his belief that he could take shortcuts and get away with it. I had been given a gift, the chance to rebuild my professional life without the dead weight of his apathy and greed. My story was not about a wronged victim. It was about a prepared professional who was able to turn a betrayal into an opportunity. The door to that part of my life was closed, and I had no desire to open it again. I had a business to run, a legacy to build. The future was bright, and it was entirely my own. I had no doubt that with the right preparation and the right mindset, I would conquer it all. My phone rang. It was Elena Vance. She had a new project, a series of global ad campaigns. "We'd like you to handle it all," she said. I smiled. The revenge was a beautiful thing, but the success was even better. 2 years had passed since the final court ruling, and the world I inhabited was a universe away from the one Marcus had tried to pull me into. Ascent, the little firm he had so condescendingly dismissed, had grown into a major player in the digital marketing space. Our team had expanded from a handful of dedicated professionals to a staff of 30, each of them a testament to the culture of excellence and integrity I had built. We had moved to a new, sprawling office space, a building with floor-to-ceiling, windows that overlooked the city, a view he had once said was too big for my small thinking. The Synapse project had opened doors to a series of other high-profile, global clients. Our work was being featured in industry publications, and I had become a go-to speaker on topics ranging from strategic business, development to crisis management. I was a CEO, a mentor, and a leader, and with every step forward, I left his memory further behind. The final piece of news about Marcus came not from a mutual acquaintance, but from a former client of his who reached out to me for work. She mentioned his name in passing, a note of embarrassment in her voice. "I don't know if you've heard," she said, "but Marcus, well, he's gone. His professional reputation is in tatters. He tried to get a job at my company, but our HR department flagged him immediately. The word is he's completely out of the industry, and his finances are a disaster. I heard he's living with his parents again." The news was a final period on the sentence. of his professional life. He had been so focused on taking from others that he had failed to build anything for himself. He had thought that he could acquire success. He never learned that it had to be earned. His downfall wasn't a punishment I had inflicted. It was a consequence he had created. I felt no satisfaction, no joy in hearing this. Only a quiet, professional finality. He was no longer a villain in my story. He was a footnote. I thought about his last words to me in the courthouse parking lot. His accusation that I had ruined him. He was so wrong. He had ruined himself. He had squandered every opportunity, every advantage, every piece of goodwill he had ever had. He was a man who had been given a chance to build something great, and he had chosen to tear it down. My revenge, I realized, wasn't about him at all. It was about me. It was in the confident conversations with my new employees, in the late nights spent building something beautiful, in the quiet assurance that I had done the right thing every single time. It was in the knowledge that I had built a legacy based on integrity, and he had built one based on fraud. It was in the success that was so total and so indisputable that his very name became a cautionary tale in the industry. My phone buzzed, not with a text from Marcus, but with a message from my lawyer. He had dismissed the final ridiculous legal petition from Marcus. I smiled. It was the last ghost of the man who had tried to define me. He had failed. His story had ended a long time ago. Mine, on the other hand, was just getting started. I had a business to grow, a team to lead, and a future to build. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that only comes from hard-earned experience, that the best revenge is simply this: to succeed.